to the Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing, Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. I'll motion to open the meeting if I can have a second.
Second that.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Julia, can you hear us?
One second. Sorry about that. You should be able to hear you now.
Can you hear us, Julia?
Can hear you, cannot see you. I can see,
No, I can see the boardroom.
yeah, we can see the boardroom.
Can you hear us?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so we just motioned to open the meeting, and can you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, we have, the first pending decision we have is case number 3132, 370 Great Plains Lane. We're working on the decision. We are still not ready with the decision. Council is drafting and agreeing upon a recordable covenant, and once we have that, we can proceed toward decision. And that's in case number 3132, 370 Great Plains Lane. The first case we have is Stephen Hickey, case number 3144. Does the applicant want to address this case?
I believe, oh, yeah, you're here. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just quickly, I had submitted, Rob Herman of N Consultants, on behalf of Stephen Hickey, the applicant. We had been here a couple of times reviewing a application for the removal of the existing dock platform and the construction of a new fixed catwalk leading out to the Dug Lagoon. I believe at the last hearing that it seemed as though the board and Mr. Voorhees were satisfied regarding the presentation of the application that's before you. But it was identified at the last hearing that there was some non-compliance in terms of the landscape conditions relative to the board's prior decision and an approved plantings plan. There was an issue with this sand patio in the back and turf grass instead of beach grass over the septic in front, et cetera. The applicant has made a good faith effort, which I know because I've been following the correspondence for about 8 weeks to get the plantings done now, was not successful. They didn't get in and they ran out of time, and the reality is now the plantings are gonna have to be done in the spring. The question that I have to the board, which I submitted in a letter, was rather than just continuing to keep adjourning this over and over again and coming before the board, would the board be willing to consider the possibility of closing the hearing, granting the wetlands permit, but with a condition that a building permit to actually construct the dock could not be issued by the building inspector until such time that the plantings have been installed to the satisfaction of the village. That way we could dispense with this process if everyone's satisfied, but still the dock could not be constructed until the existing non-compliance was resolved. So that was my proposition. I don't know what the board feels about that, but that's why I'm here tonight.
Jeffrey, do you want to speak to that in the context of the new legislation?
Well, the new legislation requires that if there's an open violation, essentially, that needs to be cleared before the boards can address the issues. So it's not this board's resolution and local law that was passed, it was the Board of Trustees. And what it essentially includes is that every department, board, and committee of a village has to withhold on the processing of any application to the board or department if it says if the building inspector has determined that a violation of any provision of the village code exists on the property, or a summons has been issued on or at any other property owned by the owner or the applicant with the village, and that the processing of any application includes but isn't limited to the review by the village or its professionals or any department, board or committee. And the concern that I would have is that if there are open violations on the property, that this board would be bound by that local law and that provision.
To that point, I don't think there is an open violation on the property. It was just an observation, I believe, by this board that there was some inconsistency in the planting relative to the prior. I mean, I'm not inviting them to have a violation. I just don't know if that gives the board any flexibility you otherwise, wouldn't have. If your hands are tied, your hands are tied.
If I may, and I'm not here to dispute, my understanding is that about 13 years ago, there was, as a part of the determination at that time, in a wetlands permit, and Mr. Voorhees may have more information as to that, that there was a requirement to cooperate with the planning plan that was issued at that time, and that had not yet been complied with. So that's the condition that I'm talking about in terms of it,
Right.
which remains open and unaddressed.
So just to clarify, that was actually a permit that was issued in 2018?
Oh, sorry.
So it wasn't, I think you may be thinking of the other one. There were plantings required, but there were some improvements put on the back of the house in the wetland jurisdiction area that were not permitted. So Rob has been trying to get the installation of the plantings pursuant to that plan, as I said, that was issued in 2018. I can confirm, at least from the standpoint of technical review, that the dock had been discussed. This is the one that we had asked for, that removable aluminum ramp. And it is open grade decking, it's elevated, it's fairly short, it's a 46-foot fixed catwalk, and to my knowledge, the board didn't have any issue with that, but I haven't been authorized to prepare a permit, and I think that the law that we're referencing with respect to either violations or non-conformance, I'll let the attorney sort that out, that really does have to come first, as I understand it. But from a technical standpoint, I think we have been satisfied through the review, but it's been held because of this issue, so.
And that's exactly right. We're figuring out how to address and respond to all applicants, somewhat equally.
Yep.
The conditions in your case that that the property does not comply with are relatively minor, but the board doesn't want to have to evaluate how much of a discrepancy there might be with prior conditions, and how significant is the violation. We don't really want to be in that business of enforcement.
Right.
We'd prefer if it didn't actually reach this stage. We would prefer that the building department have caught this at an earlier stage, and then we wouldn't have gone to public hearing, et cetera. In the future, we're hoping that that is the procedure, so we don't become, the enforcement agent. The legislation is new, so we're working our way through it, but we are going to make every attempt to treat all of the applicants in the same way, meaning that we're going to adjourn pending compliance with all conditions that were previously issued. So in this case, we know that we had conditions associated with the building of the house. Those conditions are not met, so we can't grant additional relief until those conditions are met.
Understood. So then the request then tonight would be to adjourn this at least until March, because I don't see this happening before then, and depending on the weather, we might have to contact Village Hall in March and hold it over till April. Obviously, we want to get it done as soon as we can, but it's just, it wasn't gonna happen. We tried, but it didn't happen.
Okay, well, so I'll motion to adjourn this until,
Let's say March, and if we
Okay,
have
March.
to bump it at that time, we will.
all right, so I'll motion, and I'll need a second to adjourn
I would say that the last meeting in March.
case number 3144, Stephen Hickey, until the last meeting in March, pending a better understanding of whether the plantings can be completed. Can I have a second?
Second that.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye, so that's unanimous, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Before we move on, may I ask, Chick, when you're speaking, is it possible for you to speak with a mic? It's very hard for us to hear you remotely unless you're at the mic.
I
Right.
understand that Charles has asked that I go to the podium, which I will do.
Okay, thank you so much.
So the next case we have is case number 3147, Andrew Fly, 64 Downs Lane.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In line with the discussion we just had, I'll give a little background just to refresh everyone's memory. This was an application for a dock permit, which was presented and a hearing held on it. Subsequent to that, it was determined by your planner that there was an old planting plan imposed in 2000 that was not recorded against the property, in line with a variance that the property currently sat in violation of. So after discussions with the board and with council, we filed a supplemental application to address that planting plan and proposed a revised planting plan that would accommodate the concerns of the applicant, the interests of the application, and the interests of the town, of the village, and the board in achieving that, what essentially is a wetlands buffer through that planting plan. So currently, there are two applications before us, and I have a question for council as to procedure. Again, we have, in our position that we have fully presented the dock application, and now we've moved on to the planting, revision of the planting plan, which Jim from Inner Science will present just after I sit down. Are we able to consider, is it the position of council that I have to present that and get approval on that before approval can be made on the dock? And to what degree does that approval have to predate the approval on the dock? Can they happen at the same meeting? Or does the planting plan actually have to be planted? And I guess that's a question, just procedurally, how we, and I understand we're all sort of vetting this new law and how we're dealing with it.
And I'm happy to speak publicly now, and then we've spoken
Yes.
off the record before, and I'm happy to follow up off the record afterwards.
Sure.
To clarify. The question I would have is, with respect to the application marked as application 2, was that submitted to the building department for review and then a denial issued? Because
Which is
that's-
two is the planting
That's what would trigger
plan?
the jurisdiction of the board, the issue of the planting plan.
I think we just submitted it because we're requesting a
Right.
modification
So
of the
you-
original.
Right, no, I understand. So here's the concern that I have is twofold. One is that under the village law, in order for the Board of Zoning to reopen a matter, it has to be on motion by a member of the board, then a majority would have to approve that. In order for the second part of the application to be properly before the board, and I'm not here to make work for people, I'm just saying, to trigger the jurisdiction of the board, there would be an application to the building department to approve the work to be done, and then if it's denied, that would trigger the jurisdiction of the board. And the particular reason I mention that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was also the property where there was also a gate, swing set,
Swing set.
and a walkway, if you will.
There's no walkway. We're proposing the catwalk.
Proposed, okay.
Yeah.
So,
There are stones that are placed through
the reason I
access
meant,
area.
and the reason I mention that is that, certainly with respect to the structure, my understanding from a prior reference by Mr. Voorhees was that that could potentially violate section 116 and that it's in the buffer. So that, I see that it's not in this particular part of the application, and my thought would be if you're gonna go to building department, bring it all to the building department. But the short answer to your first question is, I do think that the portion that's under section 2 does need to come before the board first. And then move on to the prior application.
I think the question is, the planting plan
Yes,
would need to be implemented
yes,
before we process the application for the wetlands permit for the dock.
the existing violation would need to be cured, yes.
Right.
But if the relief is granted, if there's a revised planting plan, and that relief is contingent upon future planting, I think this board could act, in its essence, this board can cure the violation by saying we approve the revised planting plan, and provided it's, and then direct planting to happen in the spring when it's palatable for planting. In essence, I'm saying I don't know that we have to delay for no reason. I think our position would be that this board could amend the existing planting plan, which was a condition of a variance, revise that condition, saying that this revised planting plan is appropriate, and that it is to be planted at the earliest available, seasonably available opportunity. And then I think at that point, the property would be in compliance, because it would be exist in a state that is compliant with the approval, and that the approval amended the plan and said it has to be planted by a certain time. So it would then exist in a state of approval, and then we could process the dock. And that's all I'm suggesting, is perhaps we can condition that approval on planting when it's possible, and thereby not hold up the remainder of the application until spring.
I understand what you're saying. I think the concern of the board, and this goes back to the application that was just before the board earlier, is that under the local law imposed by the Board of Trustees, and that this board is obligated to follow, as are all the other land use boards, if there's an open issue, it needs to be addressed first.
And I agree completely. And I'm saying, is it possible to address it by saying, by amending the condition of that previous variance to say, there will be a new planting plan to be planted in the spring. And if that's the existing state of approval, then we would be in compliance, because we wouldn't have to plant it until spring. And then at that point, we would be in compliance currently and could process the dock.
Can I, one
Yes,
other
go ahead.
issue that I have with that, and again, it's not, is that the only reason that what you're just mentioning is before the board now is by virtue of an application, but not by virtue of the jurisdiction of this board being invoked. There was no request to the building department to do what you're saying. So the building department didn't review it, vet it, or deny it, or approve it. And that's how this board gets jurisdiction.
But if you are, respectfully, if you are requesting a modification of a previous variance, I don't believe you have to go through that building department step. You can come right to the ZBA, because you're requesting relief that the building department could never have granted. So their denial is not a prerequisite, would be our position. Because we're essentially coming directly back to the board to ask them to modify a decision that only they can make.
May I?
Yeah, of course. And if you want to have this off record.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, my position, I don't think it's going to change, but my suggestion would be, Mr. Chairman, I do think that if there's an existing violation, that the case would need to be carried over.
Adjourned until the existing
Yes,
condition
yes.
is
And
met.
that's what I would suggest, but what I would ask, we've spoken before, I would ask if the matter could be put over, and counsel, I'm happy to talk to you off the record to discuss whether something can be changed in the meantime. I don't know that my position will change, but.
I appreciate
But
that.
what I don't wanna do is hold up others here while we have.
No,
the
I
legal
completely
discussion.
appreciate that. So would it be appropriate for Jim to present the revised planting plan?
I would suggest not. I would suggest at this time, I would ask that the matter be put over. I'll follow up with counsel, and if I may then, with your permission, after our discussion, I'll get back to the board about.
Okay, so for tonight, we'll adjourn pending your conversation, basically about an interpretation of the new legislation, which does seem to require that the work actually be completed, the plantings actually be completed, not approval for those plantings, but that's, I think, the conversation you two are
Yeah.
gonna have.
It requires compliance, I agree. And the question is, what is compliance? Is compliance being in line with the decision of the board? And can then the decision of the board allow for later planting? That's our position.
Understood.
And as far as hearing the planting plan now, you're saying we have to go to the building department?
Yes, but why don't the two of us discuss that?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So Jim is not to present tonight. I just want to be clear. Okay.
So I'll motion to adjourn for all purposes, case number 3147, Andrew Fleiss, 64 Down East Lane. Can I have a second?
Second?
Second.
And then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So moving on, we have case number 3149, Claire and David Kershey, 37 Pheasant Close North.
Good evening, board members. I believe in our last meeting, we made a request to close and make a decision on this one. We went to the building department to have them review the plans, and I believe Alex Wallach delivered a letter from Tin, Chief Building Inspector, supporting that.
Yeah, so at this point, I mean, we can close and vote, but I just want to make sure that, Alex, you have from the applicant the same site plan essentially that the Architectural Review Board has. In other words, we're looking at the same front porch with the same dimensions. So that if we approve the variance for the porch, it's the same porch that the
Right.
Architectural Review Board is looking at. Is that, I mean, do you think that's the case?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we just, if you could just tell us the date of the plan that we're looking at for purposes of approving the porch in the front yard, a little closer to the road than is allowed. And if you could give us that date, we'll just make sure it's the same plan that the ARB is looking at, and we're gonna be fine.
Right. I don't have that date handy.
I believe the plans you have in front of you have a revision dated 11/9/22.
That's what I have.
And just to clarify, the board may, consider conditioning their approval on the size of the porch that's shown here. But just keep in mind, the Architecture Review Board may require certain materials, colors, or details to be, changed as part of their review.
Yes.
Yeah, agreed. We're on the same page. It's really just the dimensions. Okay, so I'll motion to, well, is there anybody from the public who wishes to be heard on this case? Case number 314937 Pheasant Close North.
There are no hands up.
Okay. So I'll motion to close for all purposes and approve the variance, the front yard setback at 72.38 feet, where 80 is required for a front porch, in plans dated November 9th, 2022. Can I have a second?
Second.
And this is going to be subject to council opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And all in favor of approving the variance for the front yard setback for the porch, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so that's unanimous, and thank you.
Thank you.
So moving to case number, no case number, and I apologize, 44 Hillcrest Lane. Jeffrey, why don't we have a case number?
Alex, what, are there case numbers? That's also for 71 Hill Street. It's very hard to keep our records straight.
I'm sorry, if that was missing from the agenda, I apologize. That might have been an oversight.
It looks like case number
Well, it's
3145, Alex.
It's missing from 2 applications on the agenda.
Well, that shouldn't be. The case number for 44 Hillcrest Avenue is 3145.
Okay, so this is case number 3145, 44 Hillcrest Lane. Is the applicant here?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board and council. My name is Denise Shern. I'm an attorney with the Adam Miller Group here tonight on behalf of the homeowners who are both present in the audience tonight, and also with their architect, Bill Slight, who will also be presenting with me tonight to explain the modifications that we've made to the application. As you may recall, at the last meeting, the board requested that we make a few modifications to the plans. One suggestion was rotating the garage so that the garage door was not facing the street. Another was that we look at the plans and bring them down in scale so that they were as modest as possible while still achieving the goals of the client. You also asked us to conduct some research in the neighborhood to figure out how many pools are in the actual neighborhood. So I have some aerial photographs for you to make that point. and you requested that we speak to some neighbors and get their input. So we've submitted to the board at least 7 letters, and I have a summary of them that I can walk you through if the board would like me to after Mr. Schleit gets up here and goes through the plans with you. So at the moment, I'm going to just take a seat and let him explain the changes that have been made, and we'll try to put on your screen also the plans so you can view them up there.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Bill Slight. I'm an architect, and I am here representing for 44 Hillcrest. As Denise went through with you, you had made a number of comments and asked that we do some changes and conduct some canvassing of the neighborhood. What I've just handed out to you are mini sets of the revised plans. There's a site plan in that grouping, a copy of the revised survey, and also a copy of the revised proposed accessory building. I've also given you a list of the things that have changed on our scheme. What we've done is we've reduced the size of the building from 520 square feet to 442 square feet. That's a 15% reduction in the area and footprint of the building. We've also changed the garage door so that it faces the east rather than to the Moore Road frontage. And there will only be one garage door on the building. Previously,
We don't have on our screens, we have Denise shown shared device audio on, optimized for video, but we don't have on our screens what you're discussing. Sorry. Was there screen sharing?
We're getting there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'd be happy to pause while we
Yeah, let's
work
wait a
that
second.
out.
There you go.
Susan, can you see that?
Yes.
The elevations, yes.
I would imagine it would also be helpful if we could see an image of the revised site plan or revised survey. Okay, that will do.
Julia, can you see that?
It's a
Yes.
yeah.
No. We have it and now we don't. There we go.
you think it's safe to proceed?
Is that readable?
I don't know why that's in a reverse image, but,
Okay,
Go ahead, please.
thank you, thank you. I had said that we had changed the garage door from facing Miller Road so that it would face the east side and there'll be one garage door. We've also increased the setback from Miller Road from the required 35 feet to 39 feet, lessening the impact on Miller Road. We've repositioned the building to allow for side access to the building, to the garage. And this new location still allows the accessory building to screen the pool from the road while seeming to open more of the property through, in a sense, allowing the property to seem more open. I've also changed the style of the building to do two things. We changed the roof shape to a hip style. That decreases the visual mass, and also the character of the building, a simple rectangular shape, and with a very simple two-window facade facing Miller Road. What we've done is really changed, make the building seem more modest in scale and in character. The site plan shows the location of the building in relationship to both Miller Road and the east and west property lines and the swimming pool. The swimming pool remains the same size and in the same location as previously proposed. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. If not, I'll let Denise continue with her presentation.
Luke, do you have any questions?
No.
Joyce, any questions at this point?
no, no, no.
Julia or Susan, do you have any questions at this stage?
No,
Not yet.
Would it be possible for us to change the image to the elevations of the building?
Actually, Bill, where is the pool equipment going to go?
We're intending to put the pool equipment within a crawl space underneath the bathroom and storage part of the pool building.
Okay.
It'll reduce the amount of noise, and we want to have a crawl space in there so that we can have access to the plumbing that will be necessary,
Got it.
for that part of the building. Okay, yes, so just to point out, the upper left-hand portion of that drawing shows the facade that will face Miller Road. The lower right-hand facade of the image on that drawing is the facade that has the garage door in it that'll face to the east. The middle image is the facade facing the swimming pool, and the upper right-hand side is the side of the building that will face west. But I also point out that the height of the building has been reduced by a foot. And as you can see, because of the hip roof, the impact of the roof line is minimal that you could achieve with a building that didn't have a flat roof.
Thank you. Do you
Okay.
wanna
Thank you.
have Denise present?
So Denise Shern for the applicant again. Further to my comments earlier, we did some research for you. I looked through the ZBA's determinations from 2000 to 2022 and was able to locate, I think 8 or 9 approvals of front yard accessory structures. These are,
I can't hear you, Denise.
I'm sorry, these decisions are for allowing structures in the front yard, but all of them also require dimensional relief. And so one way to distinguish our case from the cases that were granted is that we don't need any dimensional relief. We're within all of our side yard setbacks, and we are within coverage limitations as well. So I did prepare a packet for each of the board members if you'd like me to hand them up.
Yes, and we need to take a look at this. We're supposed to receive materials. We can receive them, but we were supposed to receive them in order to review them by Thursday at noon the week before. So I think I saw an email, but we'll take a look at these.
Thank you.
I'll leave the extras for the other board members that are on Zoom over here.
Sure. Thank you.
So as you'll see, as you'll see in that packet, the board seemed to carefully deliberate on each one. Many of the applications were scaled down in size, as we did, made more modest. But for the most part, I couldn't find any that actually were denied. There was one that the dimensional variance was denied, but the front yard variance to allow the swimming pool in the front yard was granted, or had previously been granted.
We have a lot of applicants who withdraw the application when they.
I understand. I'm just
Actually,
pointing out what I was able to
I'm with you.
find in writing, but I get it. A lot of them don't come to a written decision. You also asked us to take a look at a few other neighborhoods in the village that happen to have through streets, just to see what they look like and if they have any accessory structures in their technical front yards. And the neighborhoods that we looked at, Ox Pasture being one of them, Murray Compound being the other, they seemed essentially every lot had an accessory structure in a technical front yard, either a tennis court, a swimming pool, and many times both. So I do have aerial photographs that I can submit so that you can take a look at those. We surveyed the neighborhood, and in the neighborhood, we're able to come up with 6 swimming pools that exist in the neighborhood. None that I think would have required variances. Some are in the side yard, which actually is permitted, and others just weren't on through lots, so they didn't have the same issue as my clients.
Do you know how many through lots there are in your neighborhood where we're talking?
I'm sorry, I didn't count the number. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm interested to know.
We do need to know, I mean, how many lots are there that are like this?
Okay.
And I don't know that in the village as a whole, there are any like this. I mean, we have some where, you know, it might front on 2 streets, but one of the 2 streets is, you know, a dead end or a cul-de-sac of some sort.
Okay.
Like Mary Lee or Eel Pot, you know, which were some of the other cases.
Mhm.
This is, so we just need clarification on how many lots there are in this neighborhood that have this situation.
Okay.
If you can find anything in the village, this seems like a unique situation.
Okay, yes, we can do that. We can calculate how many exist in this particular neighborhood that go from one street to the other. There are examples you'll see on the aerials where there are streets that go, lots that go from one street to the other, but like you said, they may dead end. I didn't look at whether they were dead ending. I just was looking for whether they had accessory structures. in their front yards, because when you start this analysis, you start off with the village code saying that, you know, accessory structures are appropriate for residential lots. The problem here is that, as we've said, we go from one road to the other, and so we have no technical backyard. So we can't have any accessory structures without coming to the board. Nobody who has a through lot could do that, unless they were grandfathered, of course. The other thing that we did was survey the neighborhood, and so we've got a packet of letters for you, if I could hand those up.
You to stop screen sharing at this time? It's distracting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, while she passes those up, I just wanted to point out, I believe there are 9 through lots between Hillcrest Avenue and Miller Road.
9?
Yes,
Wow.
approximately.
Thank you.
And I know there are a few, there are a couple of neighbors that are in the audience tonight to support my 2 clients who both happen to be named Stephen in their application. So for the most part, when our clients talked to people in the neighborhood, they thought that improving the rear yard area would be a benefit to the community and not a detriment. They also were very supportive of just anyone trying to maintain and beautify their property and raise the values in the neighborhood, and also provide for, you know, aesthetic beauty. Right now, it's just that backyard, or I'm sorry, the front yard, is a wide open lawn with nothing on it. And the clients would definitely like to benefit from the accessory structures that other people in the community have on their properties.
What letters of support did you just provide us?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
I asked how many letters of support were just provided. I'm not able to.
9 letters of support were submitted to the file.
But we also got something that was signed by more than 9 people against it, so it's just a war of the neighborhood.
I haven't seen that. As of yesterday, there wasn't anything in the file yet that I could
Well, none of
respond
this
to.
should be, I don't think we should be dealing with any of this stuff that no one can see after Thursday. I find it a waste of time, frankly, because we can't see it, the public can't see it. If you want to consider it, you need to get it in on time, and then we'll consider it, but.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, go.
I'm just here for any questions that you might have.
So in this packet of previous decisions, the top 2, which I was on this board for, were for swimming pools. Do you differentiate between a swimming pool and a built structure?
In terms of the variances that I found, or?
Yeah, like in terms of, you know, are they different asks? Is it one thing to ask for a swimming pool? Is it another thing to ask for a structure?
No, I think the question is asking for anything that happens, any accessory structure that happens to be in a technical front yard. I mean, I wouldn't differentiate legally between the two. It's the same analysis. I guess it's just a matter of whether the board prefers to see structures or things that are sort of flush, you know, to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I explained at the last meeting that the rationale behind putting the structure there was to make it, you know, to essentially screen the pool from Miller Road. I guess give some privacy to the applicants, and also the passers-by on Miller Road wouldn't be able to see the activity at the pool.
I think the new proposed structure is nice, and I think the hipped roof is more in keeping with the neighborhood. I guess the question to Bill is, do you feel like this proposal that you've designed is in keeping with, is harmonious with the existing house? You have brackets here, you have a multi-pitch roof, you've got this really cool cupola.
Well, I do appreciate the question, although, you know, that may be something that the Architectural Review Board
It may be.
may more appropriately consider. You know, the existing house has it's a low-pitch roof, similar in pitch to this.
Right.
Although it is a simple end-to-end gable. You know, the reason for this was to give it a little bit less impact. And the reason for the brackets is just add a little embellishment to, you know,
Yeah.
give.
Oh, it's very pretty.
Give
I
just
like
a
it.
little, just a little step up as far as the design language.
Yeah, it's nice.
Susan or Julia, do you have any questions?
No, I'm actually gonna have to read the materials in order to be able to formulate whatever questions I may have.
Susan, do you have any questions?
No, I do notice that the pool house or the garage, what is it?
A garage,
Garage.
a one-car garage.
The size of the garage is almost half the size of the house, so it's not just screening the pool from Miller Road. It's an addition of living space or useful space, which it does not exist without it. I see that.
Right, it's giving them an accessory structure to, you know, house their vehicles and their bicycles and their lawnmower. Right now, they have the house, which is, how many square feet is the house? 1,000?
Yes.
Around 1,000, 50. So they're short on space in terms of keeping things inside, and so that it will also serve that purpose. But it's not an overly large garage.
I don't think anything on that lot can be overly large.
So leave the materials for us, we'll review them. Our mandate really is to look at a balancing,
Mhm. Yes.
detriment to the community, benefit to the applicant. After our last meeting, I had received a strong impression that the real benefit to the applicant was the pool.
Mhm.
The other structures were of some benefit, but not critical. And when we're doing the balancing, I think among the board members, although I don't, want to anticipate what would happen, is that we're leaning toward yes to a pool, but we really have some reservations about additional structures. So
Understood.
I was, after the last meeting, to some extent led to believe you might be coming forward with, we just want the pool, and we'll just, stop there.
Right.
That's something to consider. I
May
understand
speak-
the,
May I
of
speak to
course,
that?
yeah.
Because, I was approached, to design, these accessory structures. They didn't put any priority on one to the other. In fact, the reason they came to me is because, they wanted a building. They don't need an architect to design a swimming pool. They definitely, feel that there's a need for that building. The building is going to be used in two ways. It has a garage door, and it's going to be built in a way that a vehicle can be parked in it. It can also be, by withdrawing the vehicle, they can use that space, as an entertainment space. Occasionally, if there's a gathering of people, or they want to set up a dining table within that space. So that's the reason why there's a set of doors that face onto the swimming pool. The original building, which we had presented to you, which was larger, included those two functions in a more discrete way from each other. What I've designed here is to use those spaces, you know, not concurrently, but separately, depending on, you know, which is appropriate for the time. Like so many people in the village, my clients will use this house for weekend uses, and they would like to be able to house and protect an automobile during the time that they're not there. They would like it not to be parked on the street in front of their house. So, you know, that's the reason for asking for this building. So I don't want to leave you with the impression that is something that they easily want to abandon. I think that they may have been made a comment in the last meeting that may have come out of frustration, not out of desire or ranking of what they want. So please, you know, don't think that this is something that you can trade one thing for the other and have a client that's going to walk away happy. Thank you.
No, yeah, and they're not our clients, but we're just trying to do a balancing. And to some extent, the balancing, you know, of the benefit to the applicant against the detriment to the neighborhood, there's greater detriment potentially, and I'm just being transparent about our deliberations. I don't know where we end up. But the idea that you have two front yards and you're really magnifying or emphasizing the use of two front yards by creating, you know, a driveway, you know, egress and ingress, this is one of our things that we're deliberating. So it's
Right.
not just a front yard setback, it's the idea that here you are with, you know, one of 9 lots, and, you know, there's going to be entering and leaving from, you know,
Right,
from both
but
directions.
throughout the village, there are homes that are on corner lots.
Yes.
Those too have 2 front yards.
Mhm.
And in all of those cases, the accessory buildings or swimming pools, or, you know, are visible from at least one of those front yards, just as in this case, the accessory building or structure will be viewed from a front yard.
Mhm.
So the difference between a corner lot and a through lot essentially is semantical rather than in having any difference in as far as impact is concerned. In each case, cars will pass by, you know, pedestrians will pass by, have more visibility to the accessory structures than you would on a single single frontage property. So when you're weighing this, you know, weigh it against you know, how these other lots are within the village. I want to point out that in this area, there are other homes that have more than one structure on the property. That's not unusual, whether it's a pool or an accessory building or a shed or some other type of building, you know, there. So, you know, the argument that this somehow would change the nature of the neighborhood, I think, you know, it doesn't have a lot of weight. Also, throughout the village, and people are accustomed, our village residents, at a minimum, have an expectation of being able to have, you know, pools and perhaps an accessory structure, a garage or a pool house on their lots, many of which are small lots, similar in size to this. So, you know, this is not, as I've heard the word used, unique. I don't think that this is particularly unique. It is simply that there are not a great deal of lots that have a through lot situation, but it's not unique in the fact that it has two frontages.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Right. So we'll take a look at the cases.
Just, I just have two questions. Could the site be laid out in a manner that the pool and the garage pool house were next to each other?
No. No, not for the setbacks.
Right, not for the setbacks. So how much depth do you need for a one-car garage?
You mean for the interior part of it, for the car?
22 feet?
Well, you can park a car in 20 feet or 19 feet.
Okay.
For instance, an SUV, let's say a Chevy Suburban.
Right.
The length of that vehicle is 19 feet.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So, that's an exceptionally large vehicle.
Of course.
A normal sedan, for instance, 16 to 17 feet.
Right.
Mirror to mirror, you need 8 feet. Door to door, about 6 feet. On a smaller vehicle, 6 feet will even get you the mirrors.
Do we have the depth here to park a car?
Yes. Within the building?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
This looks like an accessory dwelling to me. It doesn't look like a garage or a pool house. It's got a refrigerator, it's got a sink.
It's 442 square feet.
Well, I know,
It
that's-
has a bathroom for use by the people at the pool. And there is a small little wet bar in there so that in a party situation, you know, they could prepare a drink or something from a refrigerator and
Right.
a water source.
So given the toilet and the vanity on the exterior wall, what's to stop anybody from having a doorway directly from the garage space into the bathroom?
Well, it doesn't plan out that way. I mean, you can see that the wet bar space, you know, would preclude that. But
I mean, I could back.
if they wanted to, I suppose that they could, you know, I mean,
Right.
you know, if you want to orient the fixtures on the outside wall, yeah, and you have that shared wall, that would be okay.
Yeah, I think I would be more comfortable about looking at this with an open mind if the toilet and the sink were flipped to the interior wall, and so that there could not be a door from the garage into the bathroom.
Oh, that would be possible as well. And we could still do that and maintain a window in that space. So yes, if that would you know, make you more comfortable with the building, I think that plan would work fine.
I mean, it would make me view it as a garage, which I don't
Absolutely.
view it as right now.
I understand.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I pointed out to you that, you know, that they want, the initial building that we had designed and which we've scaled back, you know, had 2 uses.
Right.
Now, we want them to have 2 uses, but we don't want to have them simultaneous.
Agreed. And I mean, it can be a pool house too,
Yes,
but it can't be an apartment.
absolutely not. Well, I mean, if you know, that's easy for us to do. We can say no cooking, no sleeping, and put that on the plan. And, you know,
Yeah.
that's assumed, by the way, for accessory buildings.
Yeah, no, it's assumed. It just it would be very easy to have
I'd be happy
it.
to put the label on the plan for you.
Yeah.
If that's
Yeah.
what would, you know.
Yeah, I'd just
give you some comfort.
flip the bathroom fixtures to the wall that
Uh-huh.
would not allow a doorway into the bathroom from the interior of the
Right.
building.
Right.
Okay, for now, why don't we adjourn for all purposes?
don't
We'll
know.
absorb.
I don't know if the
Neighbors.
I'll ask if there's
Okay.
anybody.
I'm
but-
sorry, I've just wanted to hand in my aerials because you asked me to pull
Terrific.
them,
And we
and
have to make sure that all the board members get those materials. Is there anybody else from the public who wishes to be heard on this application?
I do have enough for the.
There are no
extra-
hands up.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me motion to close, to adjourn for all purposes.
Might I say something?
Of course.
My husband and I just purchased 161 Miller Road,
Absolutely.
and we,
Your name is, please?
my name is Alexa Ania, and we own 161 Miller Road. I actually welcome this, what they're doing, because I love beauty. Everyone here in the village loves beauty, because right now, when you go there, it is Hogan's Alley. I mean, if you see the structures there, I worry about the kids that play around there because they're just dilapidated. That hopefully what they're doing is going to do a service for our area that maybe would inspire people, not so much to do what they're doing, but to simply clean it up. Because if you drive down there, I mean, there's just rusted buckets that are just like piled there. I rather see what they're doing than that, because it's also so not green. you have all that rust going into the drinking water. So hopefully, if they do that, it would inspire everyone in that area to clean up. So, you know, it bothers me because we have been living in the village for 20 years. My kids went to OLH, so it's not that I'm foreign to the village. But please, if you could consider that, and take a drive down there, because what they're gonna do is positive for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we closing this for now?
No, we're adjourning for all purposes.
Thank you.
So motion to adjourn for all purposes, case number 3145, 44 Hillcrest Lane. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So moving on to our first new case, 71 Hill Street, LLC 71 Hill Street.
This is application number 3146.
Application number 3146. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry that was missing from the agenda.
Ready when you are, Linda.
I'm
Okay.
going to introduce my client first, one of my clients, Terry Moan. He would like to introduce the project to begin with.
Yeah, my name is Terrence Moan. I'm the project manager for the development of 71 Hill Street. Since this is an application of first impression, I wanted to set the tone and the circumstances under which we're coming to you. The property has been rezoned by the village board to provide for resort hotel and workforce housing as of right. The resort hotel is different than a normal transitory hotel because we're not looking to market it so much on an overnight basis, but on a longer term basis, weekly, monthly, possibly seasonally, so that these would be more like summer rentals than overnight stays. We believe that would be the best impact for the village in terms of fewer trips, more people being able to walk to the village to enjoy the village stores and provide part of the village daily life.
Excuse me, could I just ask you, that designation was changed recently, is that correct?
Yes.
Board?
It was changed to the resort hotel.
And could you tell me how that came about?
Well, there are two actions. About 10 years ago, the uses were authorized, and about 2 years ago, the actual concept was approved to apply to this property. So it's been around for 10 years, and it's been.
I'm asking in this particular instance,
Yes,
there was a resolution by the trustees for a hotel, I guess a transient hotel.
No, it's a
And
resort hotel.
suddenly, 6 months later, you've changed that designation, and I would like to know how that took place.
Oh.
I can answer that.
Okay, go ahead, Linda.
If you'd like me to. The Board of Trustees has jurisdiction to grant a special permit for a resort hotel and workforce housing. And it was granted originally on April 20th, 2021. There was a resolution that was voted on that night, but and it was voted on as a walk-on resolution, but it had an error in it. It referred to a transient hotel, and it was always meant to be a resort hotel, so it was amended at our request on November 9th, 2021, to provide for resort hotel use, which is what we had been talking about all along before the Board of Trustees.
So Linda, it took 6 months for your office or someone to notice this? I just, there's some part of this that makes me very uncomfortable.
Can you, it said hotel, and if we didn't get a written determination the way you usually do, it was verbal determination, and it took me a while to get a determination from the clerk. But I don't know what the I mean, it is a resort hotel that we're proposing. It is a resort hotel that we were arguing for all along. The same section also allows for transient hotels, but it's not what we want, what we applied for.
Terrence, we don't mean to interrupt you. We'll get right
Yeah.
back to
No,
it.
this is fine.
I just wanted,
We didn't, is there written resolution from that April 20th meeting?
no, there isn't.
So we're just, so how is it even a fact?
What do you mean a fact? The board has jurisdiction to, Board of Trustees.
I understand that, but where's the discussion? Where's the information?
It was-
Someone said it's okay? Really? It's a
there were-
government,
There were
isn't
public
it?
hearings. There were public
A
hearings.
hearing, not hearings. Was there? How many hearings were there?
You know, I can't control the Board of Trustees. We made.
No, but you dealt with that. Linda,
Yes.
we are just asking for the facts, the circumstances of how we get to where we're hearing this presentation, because
I'm answering your question, I think. There was
So
not.
Linda, is it possible for you to go to the podium? It's really hard to hear if you're remote.
Sorry,
I'm
Terrence.
trying to ask you to move.
Okay, but she said there was as well.
That's not what she's talking about.
Why is she saying that there wasn't one?
It is subject to,
Where did you
never
get
mind.
this? Was this in there?
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Mhm.
Maybe it's just, so there is a written resolution
There is a resolution
from April of '21.
that is
talks
attached to
about-
my application. It is a resolution. I think I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Stevenson, but I thought your question was there a determination that explored the way your determinations generally do? You know, exactly what was being granted and referring to plans and all of that. There was,
Right, just to clarify, so
yeah.
what it does not, it doesn't have stated findings of fact and things of that nature, but the resolution from April of '21 references transient, and
It
the
does.
amendment that you're referencing is the November of 2021 resolution amending, but neither include.
That's correct. The only difference is the change from the word transient hotel to resort hotel in the amendment.
Right, that's
The-
what I'm asking about.
Okay.
Because I find it curious that after 6 months, suddenly there's a change. And how was that precipitated? I just don't understand how, was there a public discussion of that? Where's the transparency of this? That's what I'm concerned about.
This is Dee Dee Godhelf from 71 Hill LLC, also part of the applicant. This was a proposal going back to 2012, when Mark Epley was the mayor. We were trying to take Viridian Way and make a 1 1/4 acre park between the Southampton Inn and 71 Hill Street. And it was very green. There were walking paths, there were bicycle paths. It was never approved to take over Viridian Way, which was donated to the village during the early 70s or late 60s. There is no paperwork, for $1. In 2012, the property there was a local law that went into effect that said that 71 Hill could be for resort hotel and workforce housing. There was no stipulation as to the number of workforce housing. There was never anything that talked about how the workforce housing would be made, but we desperately need residential, we need workforce housing, and personally I think that the tourism industry, in a limited way, we don't want massive tourism, but it does contribute somewhere astoundingly in the vicinity of about $6 million. It was a $10 million multiplier, according to the Suffolk County Planning Commission, over 10 years. We pay approximately $600,000 a year. Wait, okay, but how did we get there? We got there because it was a resort hotel in a local law from 2012. Then when we went to the...
Why was it, I just don't understand a 6-month lag to what you're saying is correcting some kind of error. I don't know.
Because there was a new, there was a different attorney, then it was the summertime, it was postponed. It took 6 months to be able to get a resolution that corrected the word transient, which is a different definition from resort, but it's all hospitality. It's just that for resort, we're able to go to a 600 square foot model of a very lovely space that we think, after 25 years at the Southampton Inn, believe the community, the village, the retail merchants we would love to see something that's a little bit more than just a hotel room. So it's been going on for 10 years.
Paperwork goes, and we have to
Okay,
go
I'm
back
gonna
to
let
having
Linda
one
come back
person.
here on the legal.
Is this, we have 2 resolutions in writing. Is this everything that we have in writing from the trustees?
That is all you have by way of a determination. Your instructions ask for, you know, the requirements for submissions, provide that I have to submit any determinations or resolutions. That is all I have in terms of that, yes.
Okay, this is everything in writing that the trustees.
Oh, no.
That the
The trustees held public hearings, not only on our petition, but held public hearings before it was narrowed down to being simply the resort hotel use. We were before the board, actually 3 different mayors and 3 different boards, talking about, it started out, as she said, with a proposal to ask the village to abandon Viridian Way so that we could put a whole resort hotel complex back there. There were many discussions that were held, and and I guess those things are in the minute books, but they didn't ever resolve. I submitted a petition. None of it resulted in a determination until we dropped the request to abandon Viridian Way and zoomed in on one particular lot and restricted ourselves to just, you know, the resort hotel use and the workforce housing and the rest of it, which we'll get to.
Okay, but as far as written determinations, not minutes, as far as written determinations go, decisions, et cetera.
Yes.
This is what we have, these 2 pieces of paper from.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted
Correct.
to clarify that.
That's it.
Thank you.
Terrence, I didn't mean to interrupt your
Yeah.
presentation, so Terrence, if you want to go back to.
I didn't mean to either, but I just needed to get how this has been launched. Thank you.
And while we're clarifying, I just wanted to clarify that this is a special permit, not a zone change.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, well, coming back to the resort hotel and the overall plan, the resort hotel units are different in size and scope than a normal transient hotel. All these units have washer dryers, they all have kitchenettes, most of them have separate bedrooms. The whole idea is to make it more amenable to a longer term, which is why it went, when it was discussed in front of the town trustees, we always discussed it with those size units in mind. So so all of our calculations, all of our environmental reviews, all had these size units there. And that's what we've used to determine what the septic, or not the septic, but the sanitary calculations were, and in our application with the county health department. So it was always intended to be a resort hotel, but for that paperwork issue, that is what we are presenting as a resort hotel, and that's the way it is intended to be used. Because of the change of the way the properties will no longer include the Viridian, the layout of the property, the development had to be changed. And that resulted in a number of these five variances that we're requesting because of physical attributes that are necessary because of the way the property lays out. This property is even though it's in Village Business District, is very unique. It's very long, it's a corner property, and it has a lot of unique aspects to it. It is primarily accessible off of Viridian Way, which is a single-use dead-end street that services only the Southampton Inn and 71 Hill. Because of the things that we are requesting, because it is a resort hotel, we're asking for 2 special permits. Number 1, as a resort hotel, it needs a swimming pool. And that's request number 1. Number 2, because we have brought in workforce housing, there's extra room in the second floors of the 2 buildings that are to remain, buildings E and F. Those spaces that are vacant and are right next to the workforce housing, we say we want to put in market rate housing, rental housing. That's my history is as an affordable housing developer in New York City. And as an affordable housing developer, you don't want to isolate workforce housing, special needs housing, any type of income limited housing from regular housing. So we're proposing to have 2 additional units of market rate housing commingled with the 4 units of workforce housing. We think that's a sound planning theory, it's a good social theory, and then we think that they should be combined. The physical site itself requires certain changes, variances that we're requesting. Village Business has a requirement that the setback can be no more than 4 feet from the road, 3 feet from the road. The plan is to leave buildings E and F, which are currently on Hill Street, where they are. They are further than 3 feet from the curb. So therefore, even though we're not building, we're not going to tear those down and build a new building, because we're putting new buildings, buildings 1 and 2, which are the resort hotel buildings, 100 and some odd feet away from Hill Street. We need a variance to build the new buildings more than 3 feet from Hill Street. Same thing is true from Viridian. The buildings are set back 9 feet from Viridian. The reason for that is that we are providing, in addition to the workforce housing, in addition to keeping the commercial and uses in E and F, we're also going to be providing the 2 resort hotel buildings and a sewage treatment plant in the rear of the building. In order to get the effluent from E and F, we have to go past the two resort hotel buildings. Their required setbacks by the health department are 4 feet from either a curb or a foundation. So that gives us our mandatory 9-foot setback. So we have 4 feet from the curb, 4 feet from the foundation, and 1 foot wide for the pipe. So that's why we need to have a variance to be able to get the effluent from E and F to the sewage treatment plant. The next variance, or the reason for the next variance, is that because again, we're in the Village Business District and we're a unique lot, the village requires that the buildings be a certain percentage, 90% of the lot. So the idea is to have high density, very tight together buildings, but you can't do that on this site because you have to have access to the parking areas. Part of our discussion, and this is how we'll wind together, part of our discussions with the planning board and the fire marshal, they wanted to have 3 entrances into the parking areas. They wanted to have 1 in the front parking area, but they wanted to be able to turn around an emergency vehicle in the back parking area. So that requires us to have 3. The zoning only allows us to have 2 on a 1 given lot, but since it's a corner lot, you can have 3. However, the third one would have to be on Hill Street, which would make no sense here. So those two are entwined together. Our buildings, we cannot have the 90% coverage, and we cannot have only 2 entrances. The right. Okay. The next one is. Oh, yeah, the curb cuts I already mentioned. Okay. The last one is there's a provision that requires. Basically, that the parking lots be used and open to the public in the village business area. It makes sense when you're driving down and you go into buy vacuum bags, and then you also get a bottle of wine. Makes sense, you leave your car there and you walk across. For a hotel, a resort hotel in particular, you do not have that luxury of being able to shuffle uses around. The people that are there, our guests, have to be able to park their cars adjacent to the facility. You can't have them wander around and park it 2 blocks away. It makes no sense. So all of these constraints, the applications are basically, the variances are basically determined by the unique nature of the site and by mandates either from planning, health department, or other governmental agencies. So we believe that these are the minimum requirements that we have. We are not asking for relief because we want to be bigger and better and anything else. We're doing this because this is what this unique site demands for this type of use. And we think this use itself, when you're doing your balancing between public good and private benefit, the public good here is the fact that you're bringing in people into the village in the hospitality settings that allow for more business activity in the village, done in an environmentally sensitive way, because people can walk from the village or from the hotel right into the village, and you don't have to have more car traffic that way. So that's generally the overall picture and why we're asking for what we're asking for. But and Linda can go into any details and answer any questions about the legality of specifically what we want to do and why we need to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you've got an overview now. I just want to settle in on some more specific arguments and address the balancing criteria, including all the criteria for variance relief as well as for the special permits. Going to the setback issue, I'm going to take the issues one by one and just elaborate a little bit. The setback issue from Viridian Way is pretty straightforward. It's unusual you're not used to, and I wasn't used to, having maximum setbacks from the street. We all usually are thinking about minimum setbacks. But in the Village Business District, as a result of a 2013 plan that was done for the Village Business District and adopted by the Village Board, they were obviously focusing particularly on the core commercial area and seeking to promote and encourage the development to stay the same and keep it within the same character. So they came up with, out of that comprehensive plan or that commercial study, and then adopted in 2009 this requirement that in the Village Business District generally, the maximum front yard setback can be just 3 feet. Here, it's impossible to do that, and maybe not only does it not serve the same purpose that it does in the core commercial district, but actually is what. Let me just say this: when we were before planning board, they were interested in getting as much green in as they could to make the setting more pretty, make it prettier. because this is a different block and it's a different area, even though it's only 2 blocks from the corner of Job's Lane and Windmill Lane, or even less, it's 1 block really, and around the corner. It's a different setting. There's a hotel across the street, as you know, and we tried to keep it as close to 3 feet as we could so that we weren't asking for excessive variances, but there was absolutely no other way to do the sewer line. We worked around it as hard as we could. The building inspector also said in his turn-down letter that we needed a variance for these buildings from Hill Street. And I disagree with that. I mean, the definition, there is no definition for principal building, but front yard is defined as the nearest roofed portion of the principal building and the front lot line. It goes on to say right in the definition that corner lots have 2 front yards. And so we're talking about, on each of them, the nearest roofed portion of the principal building and the front lot line. There's no prohibition against having more than 1 principal building in the Village Business District, not like the residential districts. And in fact, the definition of lot specifically says that you can have more than one building. Principal doesn't come up anywhere except here. And so the nearest roofed buildings, or the nearest portion of the roof buildings, is clearly buildings E and F, which are along Hill Street, which are pre-existing buildings and remain there. I was surprised, and I'd never experienced this before, that the building inspector was saying we would need a front yard setback variance from with intervening principal buildings between them. If that's the case, there's no other way to develop the whole back of this lot without tearing down the buildings E and F, which isn't necessary, and I think produces a kind of silly result. So I just wanted to address that also. So my argument is that actually there is no variance necessary, that the front yard from Hill Street ends when those buildings, E and F, meet. So the other thing I wanted to address is, well, of course, if there is variance relief that is required, if you accept the building inspector's, interpretation of this, we think it meets all the criteria for variance relief. And I want to just point out that the pre-existing setback for the building that was there where these proposed hotel buildings are and is still there on the ground, it's called Building CD in all the old department records, but it is the very long office building that has a Plaza Cafe and a bunch of other offices. It's in need of some tender loving care, that building. And rather than doing that, we're proposing to demolish it and build this instead. But my point here is, in terms of the variance relief, that the pre-existing setback of that building that exists now already from Hill Street is 162 feet from Hill Street. So what we're asking for is really not very, very different from what exists now. So it, again, goes to the character of the neighborhood. It's really not a change. The second thing that Terry touched on already was in that same section, 116-11-3, there's a provision that requires a minimum of 90% of frontage has to be covered by buildings in the VB district. Again, you can understand that on Main Street, Hill Street, or Job's Lane. Here, where we've got 638 feet of frontage along Viridian Way, it would be impossible to construct a building that covers 90% of that 638 square feet of frontage and still provide for parking and circulation and curb cuts as required. So we think that we've shown the necessity for granting that variance in this particular case. The next thing I want to elaborate on a little bit is 116.14K, which are the provisions that call for alleyways. What these sections say is that hold on a second. It starts out, actually, this section with a sort of broad planning guideline about the benefits of having shared parking and alleyways in the village business district between parking lots and between each other and between buildings, which is a perfectly understandable and laudable goal. As a planning goal, I have you couldn't help but think it's a great idea. It goes on to say that shared parking facilities shall be provided. I'm quoting here. Shared parking facilities shall be provided. Well, we're not proposing any gated parking lots. We're not proposing, and certainly people can park wherever they want. And we expect probably that there'll be some people parking across the street in the Southampton motel lot, the Southampton Inn. I should call it the Southampton Inn. So we are providing shared parking facilities, and they're allowed to be shared, is what I'm trying to say. But somewhere along the line, this provision calling for shared parking facilities has been interpreted to be a flat-out requirement, or at least it's viewed that way by the building inspector and by the planning board, to provide pedestrian and vehicle cross-access easements between private properties. I don't think that's really what the section 116.14K, subsections 1 and 2, I don't think it's really what it does require if you read the language carefully. But we are willing to provide, and we do provide, and you can see it in, can you go back to sheet 5? Pedestrian easements to the lots behind us, which are the only contiguous lots. And you can, I don't know if you can show the cursor, Lauren, but there's a pedestrian access on either side of the hotel buildings coming down from each of the parking lots. Now, there is no agreement with the neighbors, never has been, by the way. Never has been an agreement, but, and right now, the biggest of those lots, which is the movie theater lot, which has the movie theater and the parking lot in the back, all of which are completely cordoned off now. You can't use that parking lot at all. But it's been sold. We don't really know who it's been sold to. We don't really know what their plans are, any more than anyone else, I guess. I've only heard PR announcements, but PR releases. But it's not appropriate for a hotel, a resort hotel, to have vehicular access that goes right through to other private lots, even if we could work it out, and there's nothing worked out. People in a resort hotel and residents in workforce housing, for that matter, need some modicum of privacy for it to be true to what it is. So we will provide pedestrian access. It doesn't really hook up to much of anything right now, but we are willing to agree that we will do that in the future. But we do not think that we should be required to provide a driveway, an access way back and forth through the lots in the back. Some of you may remember that there was at one time, many years ago, it's been closed off for many years, a cut-through, I call it, between the movie theater parking lot and the back of this lot. A lot of people used it. It was, I call it a cut-through because it really didn't get used as often as a shared parking facility as often as people cutting through to come down Viridian Way to dodge the light at the corner, to get around the light. But we feel it's important to have some privacy, which at the same time doesn't prevent people from walking through there. They can walk to town, they can park in wherever they can find a space, or they can come to here and park. I don't think the law actually requires us to provide vehicular cross-access easements. It does require alleyways, and that's sort of an interesting concept on a property like this. Again, in the Main Street, Jobs Lane district, to have those alleyways between the buildings to get to the public parking lots in the center of those blocks makes a lot of sense. But just on Main Street and Jobs Lane, on one side, around that block of Main Street and Jobs Lane, you have a huge public parking lot back there. So yes, that kind of shared access is very important. Some of the private stores along Jobs Lane, for instance, have little parking areas in the back that go with the store, but they're not necessarily, in fact, they're not required, not necessarily required. They're not required to allow other people to park there. Those are private parking lots, and vehicles can be towed out of there, and everything. I think we've gotten to a place where we're reading things into this law that aren't really there. And the problem with alleyways is they can't actually, alleyways need buildings close together by definition, I think. There is no definition for alleyway in our code. So I'm not sure what that means, but we did the best we could by putting those two pedestrian access easements in. And of course, you can go from Hill Street between the buildings, around the buildings, E and F. I mean, there's plenty of ways to get access, and it's not cordoned off. I addressed the criteria that are in the code at length in my in my rider to the application. But just very, very briefly, I just want to make sure I've covered the statutory criteria that are in the code for variance relief. And that is the undesirable change to the neighborhood. I don't think there will be any. There's a similar use across the street. The entire block has only 2 property owners on it. There are 2 different property owners, but they're very related uses, and in fact, you know, there are some beneficial interests between the 2 property owners. There are similar setbacks and similar frontage as the pre-existing buildings. The extra curb cut that I'm asking for, or we're asking for, really at the request of the planning board and the fire marshal, that extra curb cut will be located toward the end of the dead-end street. And keep in mind that there's no prohibition against 3 curb cuts. In fact, 3 curb cuts would be allowed here if one of them were on Hill Street, as Mr. Moan has already pointed out. We have, again, 680 some odd square feet of frontage here. And we do, in fact, have ways to get into the property every 235 feet or so. I'm being approximate here. One of the requirements on the alley thing is that they should be 235 feet apart. I think we've sort of come as close as we can to the law, given the unique circumstances on this lot. Running down the statutory criteria still, the benefits sought cannot be achieved by some other method, that the applicant could pursue. We've discussed already the way how the setbacks from Meridian Way are dictated by the sewage line, how the setbacks from Hill Street for a new hotel would be impossible to achieve with the pre-existing buildings, and I don't think that's I don't think that's going to be a question, actually. The only way to provide the circulation through the north parking lot that the fire marshal requested was by the 3rd curb cut, and we would argue that the requested area variances are not substantial. The one exception to that you might have is that 200-foot variance from Hill Street to the hotel building, which actually is, again, I would argue, not really the appropriate way to look at a front yard setback, given the fact that there are already buildings in front of it. This is behind buildings, and the front yard stops when those buildings, when you hit those buildings. The granting of this relief will not have an adverse effect on the physical and environmental characteristics of the neighborhood. There really aren't any. It's a commercial district. It's not got any wetlands or any appreciable slopes or anything of that nature that is going to present a problem. Also, I would say that the alleged difficulty is not self-created in terms of these variances. It's an unusual lot. It's also a lot that is kind of uniquely suited for this property, because 116.5F of the zoning code, which allows for the workforce housing and for resort hotel use, pretty well zeroes in on this lot. So it's something that the Village Board of Trustees found an appropriate use, and I think it can't be implemented without granting those variances that we just talked about. The buildings E and F actually only have one special permit associated with them, and that's for the 2 market rate or, unregulated apartment uses. There are special requirements in addition to all the general requirements that you have to meet for a special exception use. For apartments on upper floors in the VB district, I know that the new comprehensive plan that was just adopted by this board in September looks forward to allowing second floor apartments in the VB district. It's a way of cutting down on pollution, on cutting down on traffic, on keeping the density located in the core where it's better for the environment, etc. There are a number of special requirements here that they're on upper floors only, that the size of them is, restricted but we meet all of those things. So it meets all of the special requirements for apartments on the second floor. And that leaves us with the pool, which does not require any variance relief, but under the table of use regulations, or table of dimensional regulations, really, or use regulations, the private swimming pool is permitted in the Village Business District, but only on a special use application, which has to be granted by the ZBA. There are no special conditions related to a swimming pool in the Village Business District. Obviously, it's a unique situation, but it's very, very hard to envision a resort hotel that does not have a swimming pool. This will be screened off from a Viridian Way with greenery, basically. I will tell you that we are appearing before the ARB. It's pending, it's not finished. And some of the elements that you see in this plan have, as a result of very recent meetings at the ARB, been taken out. For example, that long portico that joins the 2 buildings, wasn't any variance relief requested for that particularly. But it's been taken out because, or is being, it's going to be taken out because the ARB really didn't like it. Some of the roof lines are changing, but other than, there's nothing pending before the ARB at this point in time, and I wouldn't expect it to be. There have been 2 hearings already. I wouldn't expect there to be anything that will have any impact on the zoning relief that's either needed or requested. So there will be changes in the plans. They're minor. And of course, you will get, a full set of plans as soon as that's finished. And we'll have to go back to planning board for some modifications as a result of what's going on in ARB, probably. But I expect that we have asked for all of the zoning relief that we are going to need. I have pages and pages of, I can go through all the general special permit criteria.
We have it in writing.
Yeah, you do. And I don't want to go overboard. I'm sure there are questions.
Luke, do you have any questions at this point?
Is there anyone from the architecture firm here?
Yeah, Jack Coogan should be on Zoom. Jack Coogan, the architect. Can you raise your hand, Jack?
He is on. I'm sure Sage can bring him in.
Well, we bring them on. Julia or Susan, do you have any questions? Can you hear me,
Well,
Julia?
I have questions about the parking, but is that the Article 78?
No, we took an Article 78, yes, not about parking. We comply with the parking requirements.
Well, I have a question about that. So how many parking spaces are there?
59.
On this plan, there are 59 parking spaces?
Yes.
And
Well-
how many of those are for the hotel?
Well, it doesn't, there is a whole, it's all set forth on the parking requirements on sheet 5 of the plans, which are up here now. It's hard, no, that's a different sheet. But here, there are 44 suites in the hotel, and there is no staff because the hotel is going to be key card operated. No, there's no lobby, no restaurant, no bellboys. Anyone who makes a reservation for these rooms is going to get a card and drive up and help themselves to their room. So there is no staff involved. I'm going through some of the issues that come up with figuring out what parking is required. There are 44 suites, and theoretically you're allocating one parking space, not theoretically, under the code. You're allocating one parking space for each suite. And we did allow for 2 in staff, even though literally we do not expect to have employees on the premises other than to, clean up when rooms change and that sort of thing. But they won't be having facilities on this property.
You won't need to have staff for the pool, or a lifeguard, or someone to maintain that pool, or to be a pool operator in a commercial setting.
Well, you're right. There probably will have to be the pool. Yeah, there probably will have to be a lifeguard. No? I'm sorry. I don't.
You have to
Under
have a
the
lifeguard.
Suffolk, no, you don't. Under the Suffolk County Board of Health, if you're 4'11" or less, you don't need to have a lifeguard. We will have a lot of signage, and we have been working with Tortorella and might continue that relationship in terms of maintaining chemicals. And we will have an engineer daily in the morning and in the evening to be sure chemical levels are okay. The equipment is going to be on an auto fill. So no, you do not need to have a lifeguard on duty here. Thank you.
Because the depth of your pool is 4'11"?
The depth of the pool will be, it'll go probably from 3'6" to 4'11" maximum. Thank you. No diving board.
Won't you be required, though, to have a certified pool operator on premises several times a day?
Yes, you are required to have a certified pool operator, and at the Southampton Inn, which is the adjacent property, we have 4 certified pool operators to be sure there's someone there at any hour that the pool is open. That's going to be shared staffing.
I see.
Thank you.
I must have misunderstood something that Mrs. Riley said, because I understood you were presenting it as this is a completely separate entity. There'll be shared staffing between the 2 places.
It is going to be designed to be independently operated. There are 2 different owners, 2 different entities that own them. But initially, yes, there will be some sharing of personnel, I guess. What?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We do have a whole plan. So it's an entirely different property, but there are some synergies here, which is why if we're going to be having hospitality within the village, we feel this is a really wonderful location for it. Housekeeping. I'm sure that we're going to have 2 housekeepers that are going to be sure everything is meticulous. In terms of check-in, if somebody has a problem with a code going to their phone, there will be somebody that they can speak to who can come over and be sure there's no issue with batteries going bad or what other things that may happen. So you are adjacent to a property that's fully staffed on a 24/7 basis, 365 and a quarter days a year, and we'll pull from that. But there are also vendors within the village of Southampton or within the town of Southampton that are going to be used to service things like making sure, for instance, that the pool is properly maintained on a contract. Landscaping, now we have 2 different contracts for landscaping, and we'll be absolutely sure that the landscapers come in, they do their thing, they're not going to use gas leaf blowers, and they will be parking their trucks. We do have truck parking facilities in the site plan, but there's no need for them other than on, Thursdays when they come in for their 1 hour of cleanup. Thank you. I mean, I'll stay, but I want Linda to do this. Thank you.
Questioning about the parking, and they were Susan's questions, but since I've stepped into this, I'm curious about building E and F, and how many parking spaces will be provided, those dwellings.
No, you go ahead.
And Linda, if you scroll down, I believe you do have the parking.
For
on
the
page
parking, again, we also have evening time parking primarily for some of the hotel guests. We have daytime parking for some of the office uses, but under the zoning code, this is village business, so there is a reduction that we are in complete compliance with.
So here's my question, probably for you, Linda.
Yeah.
116-5F10. Why don't you think that applies?
5F10, it does.
Then why are you taking a deduction? My reading of 116-5F10 is that if you have 44 hotel suites, you need to allocate 44 parking spaces. You're only showing 27.
No, what do you mean? I'm not showing 27.
On the chart I'm looking at, it says required 27, provided 27.
Oh, because of the 60% reduction, yes,
Yeah. Why
yes.
do you think that you get
Yes.
a 60% reduction?
Because it's also in the code that in the VB district for commercial uses, and this is a commercial use, you get a 60% reduction.
Yeah,
That's in the
so
code also.
If I'm looking at 116-5F10,
Right.
it says the development
Mhm.
shall provide at
Mhm.
least one off-street parking space for each dwelling unit to be provided for workforce housing use, and at least one off-street parking space for each guest unit to be provided for resort hotel use.
Right.
That requires you to provide 44 parking spaces.
Well,
I don't see a reduction.
well, we went over and over and over this with the building inspector and with Nelson Pope and Voorhees, and in terms of the planning board reviews, we had a traffic and parking study done.
I'm just reading the code.
I'm reading
It's one statement in the code. I don't see any qualifications to that statement.
There is, the qualification to that statement is in 116-14H. Sorry, I just gave you the wrong site.
Isn't the problem that the special permit, or whatever you're calling this, did not take into account the code that Mark is quoting, that in a business district, you wouldn't have residential and hotel, it seems to me. Isn't it? It's pretty specific. I don't see how, if you had stores and you shared the parking, I get it. But that's not what's going on here. In fact, you vehemently opposed any sharing and cross action. And that would be in the hotel. So where are these people? The fact that you're not required to provide a parking spot for people who are going to be living there seems to me to be a serious problem.
Well, we are providing a parking space for every apartment
Well,
unit.
I'm looking at this, where are they?
No, you're providing 27 parking spaces for 44 suites.
What, you're
Extended
talking about
stay
the
suites.
hotel?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We are, yes.
So where did the other 17 guests park?
Well, wherever they want. I
They
mean,
should find a place in town?
no, there's 59 spaces in that lot.
Yes, but they're allocated to other people, hotel staff, commercial. You're allocating 27 spaces to 44 suites.
Right, but I've also explained that some of the allocation that you have to do under the code isn't really going to apply here. There is a big parking lot across the street, there's Viridian Way, there's 59 spaces on this
So you're
lot.
expecting hotel guests to park in
No.
another parking lot?
I'm expecting that they will have enough room on this lot to park.
Your
And
chart
that's-
is not showing enough room. Your chart is showing 27 spaces for 44 suites.
We're just applying the code, which
I'm reading the code to you. I don't see how you're applying the code.
11614K.
Well, then let me have a copy of that and seeing how that.
Good evening. This is Jack Coogan, the architect.
Hi, Jack.
How are you doing?
Good, good.
Sorry, I can't be there. I was there pretty late last night at ARB, but yeah, the 44 and all those other numbers listed on the chart are the requirements for those uses. And prior to the 60% reduction that's permitted by code. So the way we came upon the total is to put together all the various uses on them, on those, on the site, including residential workforce, staff, and the guests. And we were able then to, because of the code, apply in the VB district the 60% reduction on all those commercial uses. And that's how we arrived at the total. Who's actually going to use the spaces? I don't know, but we just came to that conclusion as to what the total needed to be based on the formulas that were presented to us in the code.
It seems as if,
That was our
though, the
instinct.
reduction is allowed, item 5 is allowed, if item 1 is satisfied, which is the shared parking.
Well,
Why, just please explain to me the rationale for why you would be entitled to a 60% reduction.
Because 11614K, which applies to the Village Business District in subsection 5, says parking requirements shall be 60% of the spaces set forth in 11614D for non-residential uses.
But this is a residential use.
I don't see a hotel as residential.
All night long, you've been referring to them as residences.
Well, they're hotel suites, they're resort hotel suites, yes.
They're
There's
residences.
still where people will drive in and spend
They're
the night
staying
or
overnight,
park.
you have kitchenettes, okay, you've been describing them as residences. Except when it means you have to provide more parking. So
Well,
this is my overall
the-
concern with this.
We're not here for
You-
I'm sorry, please finish, I should
think
not have
you should
interrupted.
be here
Yeah,
for a parking variance. I'm reading the code, and I am seeing the requirement for 44 parking spaces. I am not seeing how this application warrants a VB reduction in the required parking. I understand you're citing another code section. I'm citing a code section that is specific to this development and to a development that results from a special use permit. And it clearly says the development shall provide at least one off-street parking space for each dwelling unit to be provided for workforce housing use, and at least one for off-street parking space for each guest unit to be provided for resort hotel use. And that's in a section that that I think controls this site plan. I'm not seeing yet why you would, be entitled to a VB parking reduction. The rationale might be that if you were truly acting as if you were in a VB district and were providing accommodations for people visiting an office or a store who could park elsewhere and walk onto this property, that would be the rationale for a percentage reduction. That's why I asked you, what would be the rationale for you to be entitled to a 60% reduction in required parking? There's no rationale. You have overnight guests there, and you're suggesting that they might park elsewhere.
I'm also saying that there are 59 spaces.
Yes, I
And
understand
there-
that, but the other spaces are allocated to hotel staff, commercial, workforce units, and apartments. You have a total of 59. I'm repeating myself, or you're compelling me to
understand.
repeat myself. You are only providing 27 spaces where 44 is required. You're taking a VB adjustment of 60%, which I don't think you're entitled to. And I don't see what the rationale would be for you're taking a 60% reduction. You're not providing enough parking spaces for your guests.
The building inspector and everyone else who we vetted this with all throughout the process has said that that applies and it complies.
I'd have to see something in writing where they're reading this provision and explaining why it doesn't apply, because it's very clear to me.
But
And I don't understand how, if you have 44 units and you're only providing 27 parking spaces, what is your explanation as to where those 17 people are going to park their cars? And that's assuming that everybody staying there is only coming with one car. But let's say for a moment that everybody staying there is only coming with one car. You have 17 hotel guests who most likely have arrived in a car. Where do they park?
on one of the 59 spaces.
But there, okay,
There are 50, no, we are saying, we are going back and forth. But there are 44 units for the hotel, and there are 6 apartments. Together, that makes 50 spaces. If everybody is there all at the same time, parked in the same space, there's 50 spaces. There's plenty of place for them to park.
I don't. My personal
There's
opinion is you
not.
don't have
If
enough
every
parking.
spot is being used as the chart outlines it, then there's a shortfall. You can't plan this and hope that you never reach maximum occupancy in the parking lot. You can't just hope that everyone will have the spots they need. And like Mark says, you know, you're assuming that everyone is going to bring one car. What if a couple wanted to rent one of these rooms for the summer and they've got 2 cars? You know, chances are that's going to happen.
Well,
Which brings up the other question is, what is the maximum amount of time that I would be allowed to rent a room here? Could I rent it for a year?
no.
No? I could rent it for what?
A month.
1 month? 28
28
days? And then I have to leave.
28 days is transient. You can rent it for a week, for an overnight, you can rent it for, I'm sorry, do I have?
Yes.
Sorry. You can rent for an overnight, you can rent for a week, you can rent for a month. You cannot have it as a primary residence. This is not going to be seasonal rental housing per se. When this had been discussed with prior boards, there probably, I don't want to give a number, but 20% of the guests do come by public transportation. They are picked up by the jitney or the van, or they take taxis in. One of the beauties of the location is that you don't have to come with a vehicle and park. But again, conceptually, if there are 44 people, we should only be so lucky, 44 cars, and let's assume it's 40 cars because only 4 of them, 10% of them are coming in public transportation. And we're not going to assume that there's a 2 or 3 family situation. I mean, there's a lot of what ifs. But then you also have parking for the various office. There's really not retail per se there, but retail or office. You've got parking on Veradian, you've got parking on Hill Street, and you've got the code that said the 60% reduction under the village business. So again, in requesting the special use for residential, yes, we would need to have parking allocated for that if you decide that that's okay for the property. But I think it's okay. Again, these are two conflicting pieces of this code. It's fascinating, where it comes out practically. I'm not the attorney here, thank goodness. Thank you.
So we couldn't do a seasonal. I couldn't rent here from Memorial Day to Labor Day.
I guess technically you could. The transient is a 28-day with a temporary residence permit under the Suffolk County Code. The resort hotel, by definition, permits the extended stay. I suppose it could be seasonally, although there are plenty of houses that people can be renting for seasons if that's what they're looking to do. They probably don't want to be in something that's 599.99 square feet. But I do think there are families who come in who would like to be able to make Cheerios for their children and not spend $20 for breakfast in the morning per person. And the concept was to permit people to come for their 1 or 2 week holiday, or even to come for a month, but not necessarily July 1st to July 31st. Maybe they want to come July 17th to August 13th. They might want to come for a week at the end of the month. It's just a different type of product from what the Southampton Inn offers.
But I feel like what are the specifics? What are you allowed to do? I hear you saying this could be this could be that. Are you enjoying from renting these things for 9 months? 1 year, people could live in these places.
We are enjoined from having them as primary residences.
That's not the issue. They can, are you gonna go around and see where they vote? I'm asking you specifically. Are you entitled to rent, let's say, to me and my child, one of these units for 9 months? So my child would go to school here.
I think we'll have to get back to you. No, these are not intended to be.
I don't care about intent. I'm asking about the rules.
So
you work on rules and measurements, not supposed things.
And
that's my problem here.
In the code, it's defined, a resort hotel means a use which provides guest units for occupancy by tourists and vacationers on a seasonal or transient basis. And then it goes on to talk about what they can include in terms of sleeping, cooking facilities. A resort hotel is not intended to provide guest units for occupancy as the primary residence of the occupants. So that's the only answer I can give you. That's what the code says, and that is the intent for my clients. I mean, there's nothing that says, you can do it for 60 days, but not 61.
But it was clear at the outset of the presentation, both by you and Mr. Moen, that this was not intended to be for overnight guests. And in fact, one of the reasons that you went from being considered a transient to a residential, which we asked some questions about, was in fact for stay.
I mean, the Southampton Inn, for example, which is a different premises, has rooms that are available very much on a very transient basis, for a weekend, for a night, etc. Here, it's to provide guest units for vacationers, tourists, whatever, on a seasonal or transient basis. Although
is the Southampton Inn a transient hotel?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So I have a question for the architect. Sometimes the design and the site plan is very much influenced by client requests. And we have a site plan now that obviously requires all these variances. If you, hypothetically speaking, if you had carte blanche to redesign the site in any way that you felt was best, do you think that you could lay this site out and avoid some of these variances?
No, well, I'll need a pool. The setbacks, the 3-foot setback is not really practical consideration. In fact, that came upon us late because it didn't seem, it came out of left field because it didn't seem to really be intended for Viridian Way. I can understand it as an urbanist on Main Street and on Hill Street to create that that density for shopping, et cetera, but not on Viridian. So I think that a buffer, planted buffer along Viridian would be much more appropriate in this case. The overall site plan, we did have many variations, as Dee Dee had mentioned earlier. Our first proposal was to plant Viridian Way and create a public park there. And so our building was oriented onto that green space. That was our first attempt. And then there were conditions that didn't happen. So given that we had Viridian to work with, we worked very carefully over a year, about 15 months with the planning board to actually come to this point, to get as much green space on the property as we could, to create a plan that they felt responded to their priorities and their concerns. And yeah, this plan that we have, and no plan is ever exactly the way you want it to be, but it's it's something that's a consensus in a way when you're dealing with a community. And we worked hard. The parking, for instance, was something that we worked very hard with the planning board on, and with their consultant engineers on, to determine what the requirements were for that. And as I mentioned before, we worked the formulas that came to us in the code and got to that. And part of that was to try to create as much green space as we could. And we presented a landscape plan that went along with it, and worked out our terraces off the rooms. Each one has an outdoor terrace and a porch space to try to create this indoor-outdoor opportunity for the guests. So I guess no, at this point, this is the best plan that we felt we could have for this site.
Jack, is it Jack?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jack, let me ask you just a couple of questions in the ballpark. The answers can be ballpark. Is
sure.
The total, what we would refer to and what the board is accustomed to looking at, would the total gross floor area of all of the units be what, about 40,000?
I don't have access right now to the chart, but it is on the site plan that was presented there. And I guess it's about that. I think it's in the 30s now. I think 36,000 or so.
And the lot coverage would be about 25,000? Ballpark. I'm just trying to...
As much as I worked on this so many times, I don't have it on the tip of my tongue. But that site plan does have the chart that has that coverage on it. Yeah, it's less than what is there now when you consider the paved area.
Yeah, no, I saw that.
Paved.
If you could, but the way we calculate lot coverage, paved area is not part of lot coverage if it's at grade. So I'm just trying to look at, because my overall concern with this is that you're in the VB district.
Yep.
But you've changed the use to a residential use. When you did that, well, I'm looking at overnight stays with kitchenettes as residential, call it quasi-residential, but you're really not village business anymore. You're just in the village business district. And all of these variances result from the incongruity between your use and the dimensional requirements. Okay, the reason why you have these strange setbacks is because the Village Business District did not anticipate residential units being here. That's why you're supposed to be closer to the road, because you're supposed to be a storefront or an office.
But
All
do you
of
think
these-
that based on?
Let me finish.
Right.
So let me finish. So
Yeah.
a lot of these, you don't have any dimensional requirements or limitations that are normally associated with residences. You don't have any gross floor area limitations.
Right.
You don't have any lot coverage limitations.
Correct.
Okay, you've benefited tremendously, okay, from the fact that for some reason, a reason I don't quite understand, when the use was changed from village business, a typical village business use, to residences, the setbacks, the dimensional requirements, the lot coverage, the gross floor area, it was not changed.
Yeah.
Okay, it should have been changed. Your parking, everything should have been changed because of the change in use. Instead, we're carrying forward the dimensional requirements and the setbacks for village business. And it's not making sense to anybody. That's why you need all of these variances. That's why your setbacks are strange. But what I see here is an incredibly dense in terms of gross floor area, dense as far as lot coverage, dense as far as setbacks relative to any other residential development. And it all results from the idea that all we have from the trustees is a change of use without any consideration of, when we change the use, what do we do about parking? So you have taken the opportunity to say that since I'm in the Village Business District, I deserve a 60% reduction in my parking requirement. I don't think you do. Okay, it would be strange for you to, on one hand, say, I'm going to have residences here, but I want to take advantage of the benefits of being in the Village Business District. In other words, a reduction in parking requirements. But then again, there aren't any pools in the Village Business District, so I need a variance from you. It seems to me like you, as an applicant, have put together a site plan and a proposal that asks for all the benefits of being in the Village Business District. And when those Village Business District's requirements don't suit your purposes, you need to ask for a variance. So you're benefiting from the fact that the Village Business District doesn't have gross floor area requirements, lot coverage requirements, even though you're essentially implementing residences. But unfortunately for you, the Village Business District also doesn't allow pools as a matter of right, as they would in a normal residential section. So that's what is bothersome about this. I keep looking at your variance requests, and they're strange, and they're almost a matter of first impression. And the strangeness results from the fact that you're essentially implementing village residential occupancy units and trying to apply village business zoning requirements, and they don't match.
Yeah, I understand completely what you're saying if they were residences, but this is the first time I've ever heard anybody refer to this hotel as a residence. And we've been at this for, as I said, a year and a half with the village.
I was listening, your council referred to them as residences.
They're not residences. This is a hotel. This is a business.
No, yes.
The hotel where
They're
people live.
These are overnight, you're staying overnight, you have kitchenettes, and you're inviting people to stay for a month or two or longer. Okay, what is the difference between what you are offering the market and a residence?
There are hotels of this nature all over, Quality Inn, Howard Johnson. They all have suite type setups within their portfolio. They may call them different names or whatever, but this is very typical in the hospitality industry. And this is no different. This is certainly not a residential building. It's not a multiple dwelling. This is a hotel that is run by affiliate of the, legally, I don't know, but the Southampton Inn. This is their development. They're trying to provide a different product based off of what they've been successful at in the village for all these many years. They just want to expand upon that success and offer something to the village in terms of, you know, more foot traffic into town, et cetera, as Terry had mentioned before. It is a business, and it's intended to be that way.
I don't think we're arguing that the hotel management is a business, but what you're providing is residential.
No more so the hotel.
You think that the people who run the hotel need to swim in a pool? Come on, this is.
Oh, come on. Have you ever been to Cooper's Beach when there are red flags for people who don't swim so well, or jellyfish, or it's really hot and you can't walk across the sand? I'm sorry. This is a hotel. If asking for the special use permit for workforce housing and for some residential on the second floor is giving a flavor of having us be asking for a sort of multifamily sneaking it into this property in this parcel. Okay.
We're not saying that. We're saying that what you are offering is a place to live.
Well, but we're not. These are tiny little units. I mean, they're under 600 square feet. Some of them are 450 square feet. They are. It's a hotel.
But you're offering to rent these for periods of months. Come now.
We are doing what the definition of resort hotel is. I mean, transient.
I'm not arguing that. I'm saying to you that what you are offering is a place to sleep, cook, and live. Maybe not forever, but that is your product. That is what this is. It's not a place for you to have the headquarters of an enormous hotel business. This is where people stay. There is no getting around it.
I agree with you. So it's an anomaly. In terms of the use variances, I think the pool is an important marketing, branding, and in the village, it's an important amenity to have. In terms of the request for the residential on the second floor, we don't have to do that. We can keep it as commercial. I just think it's a better use. Okay, so that's, okay. In terms of the variances, okay, it's 44 hotel units. The variances, again, I'm not the attorney on this team, but we could move the building to be within 3 feet of Viridian, but then you don't get the sidewalk, which was requested, and you don't get all of the green, not a lot of green, but you get the green. So originally, going back several years, there was a plan for this building to be very linear. It came all the way up to Viridian, and there was parking on the eastern side. And you went in, you had one curb cut going in, you went around, and one curb coming out. The lot coverage was much more dense. Lot coverage didn't come down as much. The green space wasn't as much. The number of units were greater. It was actually 48 units at that time. There were more parking places. So what we're here with is a product that's taken many years, but it's definitely not a residential project, although I certainly understand that if you have 44 parking places for 44 units, and then you're going to add 6 more between workforce and some market residential, you're at 50 units, you've got 59 because that's the 60%. That's a bit of a conundrum. I mean, I understand. I don't know the answer to it. One answer is lower density so that you have parking places for fewer units, but this is an opportunity to have this hospitality use in a space within the village that some of the other hats in the village for the recreation, for the nonprofits, for the shops, for the restaurants on a year-round basis. We know we need to sustain a business here. But that's not, I know that's not zoning board of approval, but that's kind of where we came to from village board initially, and then we went to planning board. It's in the county for the sewer treatment plant. They wanted to have the setback. The setback that's there now is 9 feet, we're asking for 10-foot 3. I mean,
Setting a building back, you wouldn't hear a concern from this board. Setting a building back further from the street, that's not a difficult variance.
so the thing that we're really stuck on, and I agree with you, is the number of parking places. I mean, that seems to be the most significant, because there are a dueling, I guess, code requirements here. I'm going to step back from that. I don't know how to answer it, but the sidewalk in the green space is the request for the 9-foot setback. It's not only the sewer line, because that can be located elsewhere, but it makes sense because you get a sidewalk and because you get green space. The 3 curb cuts is what you get anyway. It's just that instead of having 1 on Hill Street and 2 on Viridian, we're requesting 3 on Viridian. We're giving up the Hill Street because the Hill Street buildings they're attractive. They've been there for since 1980 something, so it's 40 plus years. It's abstract bastard Tudor architecture, but it's what has been there. And so the idea of asking for a 190 or 176 foot setback from Hill Street is a little, I mean, Linda used the word silly. We could come back with a plan to take those buildings down, and we could move the whole thing up to Hill Street, and we could have a 3-foot setback there. But I don't think that's what the village wants. I'm sorry. Yeah, it is. I'm sorry. I'm talking too much. We're keeping those buildings. We're keeping the alleyway, which is the little brick plaza area there. Hopefully, we'll have furniture the way we used to that came from Meadowcraft through Hildreth, except people drove up in the middle of the night and they put it all in their truck and they drove it away. So we'll figure out a way to secure it now to the premises. I think the ask for the variances, I mean, to me, the quantity of linear feet is large, but in concept, it's not so much. We're not asking for rear yard setbacks or height setbacks or density setbacks, because as you point out, you don't have those. The floor area ratio isn't part of the district.
You have the most liberal setbacks of any development I can imagine in the village right now.
Well, it's a funny hybrid. So again, I'm going to sit down before I say the wrong thing, but how to handle this use, which seemed like a welcome business use within a business district. It is definitely a hotel. People don't want to live, I mean, this is not going to be, to speak to Susan's concern, this is not it's not going to morph into a multifamily 599 square foot year-round with children that are going to be going to the school system. That's not permitted. What we did in a project that I worked on in Hampton Bays in 1982, we could put something into, we could add something saying that specifically this is not for primary residences, it is only hotel. We could have some limitation if that's helpful in terms of the length of time, but that's creating more law. But if that would be comfortable, I'm happy to do it.
Problem is the parking.
Well, that's the conundrum. So I'm going to sit down now because I don't know how to answer that one. But I do know that we have people who specifically love Southampton because they come on the train. This isn't, this is anecdotal though, so it's not fair to talk about it here.
There's the law. That's what we're saying.
But the law is, there are 2 laws. So
yeah,
if you
well,
have,
I think that one law that Mark read was specific to your particular situation, and it specifically mentioned the workforce housing. My guess is, I wonder when that was put on the books. And that it mentions hotel, or I don't know what the term was. And that is what we're looking at here.
Mhm.
Nothing else.
well, in 2009, that was put on the books. And 2012, there was.
And did you have a plan before the board, and that's why it was put on the books?
The plan was to have Viridian returned to the owners on either side to make a 1.25 acre green space in the middle, to have walking paths to connect to Cooper's, to have bicycle paths,
Yes,
and
but
to have a
about the
linear
hotel,
building.
was that was
Yes,
a
it was absolutely. It was a hotel product. The differentiation between transient and resort is something that has been defined by code. The difference is that people seem to ask for a product where they can come out and have their holidays here. and be able to make cereal and not necessarily be behooved to go to Claude's for the breakfast or to go to local restaurants. It's expensive.
We're not arguing that. We're arguing
The
that.
parking, I know,
there
so
needs to
let's.
be adequate parking, or it's a detriment to the village. That's what we're.
I understand that. So how can we fix it? We have a 60%, which had gone through some of your predecessors. We have Mark's wonderful reading of the one space per unit, which would give us 44 and 6. I don't know. What should
Excuse
we
me, the
do?
way it was interpreted to this point, I mean, everybody understood up to now that it is a commercial building. And the way, there is that rule about the 60% for commercial, but 60% of what? It's that section that you're citing about the 1-for-1 that determines what 100% is. And then it's the interpretation, our interpretation, and those on the planning board and their consultants, that then you take that number and apply the 60% to that number. That's how it's arrived at. And that's how we work the chart that is there on the site plan, and how we determined we did the same thing for all the various uses that are listed there to come with the total required parking for the site for the various uses. That was how it's been till now.
So, having listened to all of the testimony and this back and forth this evening, my sense of it is that this is all being looked at in two very different ways. I'm left with wondering, was underground parking ever considered for this project? And secondly, you gotta decide, because you've talked about this being a residential hotel, and I will say in my own life experience, I have lived in under 600 square feet for 20 years, very happily. So to describe this as being something that's tiny, that will not accommodate people, this is a wonderful rental opportunity for someone for the season. And if you're not seeing it that way, you haven't lived in a major metropolitan area for some part of your life. Because this, I'm surprised that the real estate community isn't going crazy over the prospect of this. In terms of what it might do, there'll be 44 less units not available for people. But was underground parking ever considered for this project?
Yes, it was.
And what happened?
And it's infeasible.
Why?
We started with the underground parking. It's a very narrow site. So in order to have the ramps, Jack can talk to that, when you were trying to ramp in and then be able to go around, the site couldn't accommodate it. And the fire marshal and the angles weren't going to permit that to happen. It's where we started.
I mean, you could come in on the southeast corner where building F is now and just drives directly down. I mean, given the financial intervention on the property, I don't really understand the value of saving ENF. Part of what I was getting at with Jack is that we've got this long linear site, and then we're putting two very large buildings perpendicular to that right in the middle of the property, and it just seems to me as a very inefficient plan. And I would say, if I were taking a whack at this, I would break building 1 and building 2 into 4 buildings, and I would consider ENF as on the table for demolition, and I would go for more of a campusy feel, as opposed to these two large buildings that are right in the middle, blocking your access to lot 10. It doesn't have to be like that. You can design this site to allow access to the movie theater parking lot. It's just been ignored. You've sort of run around this site creating problems for yourselves, because I think someone got locked in to the idea of these two buildings and this central pool.
That it did evolve. I mean, we had a linear building running along Viridian. We had never considered taking down ENF, and we always thought that those were something to help this development, fit into the existing fabric of the community that what people are used to. In fact, our building is not even visible from Hill Street. So we thought this was a low impact way of introducing 44 room hotel into this site. And as far as like knocking the building out to bring a ramp in there, I don't think that would be very pretty at all coming off the Hill Street. We still did want to keep the commercial there on and create, to keep the clock tower and the little terrace that's there now, just to keep that continuity of what people remember, what people know about the village as they enter in from the west. I mean, that's kind of a entry point in landmark into the town. So
It's an entry point for sure, but it relates not at all to the proposal for 1 and 2. You've got the 2 Tudor buildings on Hill, and then you've got these 2 shingle style things up in Viridian. It's not cohesive at all.
Well, we get into that with the Architectural Review Board too.
I mean, you tell me. Are they not disharmonious?
They are. Well, there is a campus that is set up with the existing inn and those 2 buildings, and then we have brought in. I mean, throughout the village, throughout the community, there are various styles next to each other, almost every lot. And we're selecting one that is one of the more typical, as opposed to the faux Tudor that was created in the 1970s. That's on the site now. So, that's a separate matter. I mean, that's an architectural style matter. You could talk about that forever. But it doesn't get away from the fact that this is not a residence, and this is a hotel. And I don't know what the difference between what's being presented here that has a kitchenette attached to it, how different that is than the rooms that are across the way in the inn right now, where people could, if they chose to, stay there, I don't know, indefinitely. So we're getting, we started out with some requests, and it seems to have spiraled into something more existential, I guess, with regard to this whole development.
I have a question that I wanted to ask in terms of this density issue and the problematic issue with the number of parking spaces or lack of parking spaces per the ratio to the units. When is you've done a traffic survey? Because the way that this is currently laid out is going to be incredibly congested for the small area also with the Southampton Inn, traffic as well.
A traffic study was done, a parking study was done, and it complies with all the requirements of the village right now. I mean, that's why the building department did not object to this as for a parking variance. Can I just say?
I'm sorry, I just do want to clarify, the statement that it complies with all the parking requirements, that's one of the actual issues before this board right now, a request for variances of 2 particular parking requirements. That's before. It is.
It's the easement requirement.
It's the shared parking, which
Shared
I
parking.
understand that you've said that you should not need to comply with, but it is before this board. This was denied for that, and the reason that I mention it is because that is a parking requirement under section 116-14K, which is the same section that you have cited about the 60%, but it also includes the 2 paragraphs that are being before this board for requested variances, that these are requirements under the code. So I'm not here to fight with you. I'm just saying that those are parking requirements. There were denials with respect to 1 and 2. They are requirements under the code that need to be met. So that the question would be, the choice is being made to pursue the 60%, but not 1 and 2. So I just wanted to point that out so the record's clear that you are before this board for those.
And we would certainly go to the north. There are 3 lots that are owned by the village. It would be possible to have shared parking to Cooper's Farm, off to Windmill. We could do shared parking with the movie theater, but there are grade changes between 4 and 11 feet, whether you're at the south end or at the north end. We have heard, this is the wrong form, I mean, we're on TV. I've heard it's turning into a private nightclub. We don't, there's nobody to talk to. We don't know how to arrange cross vehicular traffic. We do know that years ago, there was this back channel to go from Windmill through the movie theater and then up the hill. We got a very stern letter from our insurance company saying unless the village endorses it and unless we get permission from the owner of the movie theater, that we absolutely under no circumstances are permitted to open up public access. I mean, it's just such an interesting conundrum in terms of how to make this work. But if the shared parking you have parking, we probably don't want to have people parking on First Neck, but there certainly is parking there. There's parking on Hill Street. There's parking on Windmill. There's parking at the Southampton Inn. We do know that there are guests. This came up with the planning board. Guests are coming by public transportation. There are limousines, I'm sorry, that sometimes drop people off because they don't need to have cars to access. But that has nothing to do with the numbers. If we don't get a 60%, but we need to have the cross access, there's nobody to talk to be able to do that. The pedestrian, of course we can. If people are parking at a movie theater, assuming it ever becomes a lot, they want to park there and they want to walk through, or they want to park in our lot, more likely, and then walk through. I mean, that's certainly physically feasible to do. I don't know how we can change the grade, especially where the Verizon buildings are, to be able to physically accommodate providing at this moment in time. We're ready to go. That could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, it could be a dozen years. We just don't know what we're talking about by providing cross-access there. Cross-access to the Southampton Inn, cross-access to the Cooper's Farm, cross-access to Verizon is an 11-foot drop, cross-access to the movie theater, cross-access to the little Southampton Business Center there. They already have stairs. They've put stairs in so people can park in our lots and then they can walk down to them. So we're in your hands. I don't want to prolong this. It's so late, but.
I guess we've assumed that the 44 units that you're proposing as like a baseline, right? But it's not. You could do fewer.
We could, and we could also not. I'm at the very critical point now where we need to either fix up the building that's there, which is certainly an opportunity, it's an option, and we can fix the parking lot and we can call it a day. It's fine, it's rental, it's offices, but we don't need offices. I've been in Southampton since I was born, which was a way long time ago. We need some hotel rooms. The Village Latch went out. The Butler's Manor was for sale. We don't know what's happening with Inn on Main, but we are a resort tourism space. We don't want big chain hotels to be coming in here, but we're bursting at the seams from people within the community looking for opportunities to house their house guests, their families, to have fun, festive events. We need 44. Okay, you tell me 40? We can do 40. You're telling me 35? I'm going to say, forget it. We'll fix what we have. It's a balance, and it's negotiable. Of course, we can do something with this. I just want to come back to this. Thing started with a linear, it was a linear, like the Boar's Head in Charlottesville, Virginia, which are these grand, very long. They have these balconies looking out, private space for each one of the hotel rooms. They have little arches. That was an initial thought, and underneath you could do your underground parking. Terribly expensive. There's a water table to deal with, but even more than that, Jack has told us the angles for coming in and going out don't work. Could we take down buildings E and F? Yeah, we definitely could, but that was so frowned on by, again, predecessors of yours, because they're part of the fabric of the western entry into the village, with the clock tower, which we hope we'll be able to also be fixing up at this point and fix the clock maybe, and maintaining that little plaza area. I'm going to stop. I'm sorry.
No, I think a hotel is cool. I mean, the idea of people walking down the hill to go to restaurants is great. I don't think there's an opposition to that, at least from this seat. But, I don't think all your problems are worked out yet, and I think you can work out a lot of these problems without needing to really be with us for so many
Well,
items.
See, I
It just
don't
feels
think-
very schematically designed so far.
Oh, okay, I would defer, on the design, it is in schematic design, because until we know that you're conceptually okay with this, until we know the number of units, until the Suffolk County who lost their machinery is able to respond to our year-old application for the health department for an STP, you know, it's very amorphous at the moment. It's changing, but
Well, why-
what
why
can
don't
we
we
do?
adjourn this for
Yeah,
now? Let
thank
us
you.
collect our thoughts.
That, I
Good
would
exchange.
appreciate that.
We'll, you know, we'll-
Thank you
we'll
very
figure
much.
things out.
Okay.
So for right now, let me make a motion to adjourn for all, sorry. Oh, I am so sorry. It just, I really apologize. Does anybody from the public wish to be heard?
I do, very, very, very briefly.
No one's hand is up.
Yeah.
That's okay. Good evening. I'll be very brief. My name is Jennifer Nigro. I'm an attorney with Toomey Latham. My clients are the Irving Homeowners Association. They are located at numbers 3 through 15 First Neck Lane, it's Cross Hill Street. They are only just receiving notice of this project. Obviously, we have a lot to digest between this board's files, planning board's files, ARB files, and our only request is that you leave the record open in case we want to make some submissions, or even, now that I know Linda's on, chat with Linda and voice any concerns we may have, and maybe we can even work that out together.
Could you repeat your name?
Sure, Jennifer Nigro, Nigro. No relation to Dr. Nigro.
Laura. And you were Tommy Latham. Okay,
Yes, thank you.
thank you. Yes, we're definitely leaving the record open. So I'll motion to adjourn for all purposes. Case number 3146, 71 Hill Street. Can I have a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then I'll motion to close the public hearing Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. Can I have a second?
Second.
And all in favor of closing the public hearing,
No, closing? I thought you were adjourning.
the public hearing? We adjourned
The
your-
meeting.
The meeting.
The meeting.
But we didn't set a date.
When,
We
yes,
didn't-
we didn't.
we
It
didn't
would be
set
for
it.
the next meeting in January if
Oh,
we're
okay.
ready, but.
Can
Okay,
we
so,
go ahead,
all in
please?
favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Maybe if we could just,
Sure.
Mr. Wallach, the next meeting in January, just so the records clear, if we could put that on the record, do you guys have to change it?
Jeff, I'm having trouble hearing you, but I noticed that
We had
there is
January 9th.
a typo on the agenda. It
January
would-
9th?
it would be
That's what it says
January
on the agenda.
10th.
January 10th?
Yeah, January 10th.
Thank you.
The
Yep,
agenda
which
says
is the
9th.
Tuesday. I'm sorry, January 9th is a Monday, is the ARB meeting.
2023.
Thank you. for
Thank you,
clarifying.
Alex.
No problem.